The night had started like any other. Cassie's penthouse was dripping with luxury, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing a glittering Los Angeles' skyline. Soft music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses filled the air. I stood near the bar, sipping my drink, and watching the city lights twinkle. This was the life I thought I wanted, a designer in Sean Diddy Combs' world. But even in moments of triumph, I walked around with a quiet unease. Diddy's charm could turn on a dime, his smiles masking something darker. I had always tried to stay in his good graces, but that night, I could feel his eyes on me. "Vanna!" His booming voice cut through the room. I turned to look at him and he was grinning. There was something about the expression that made my skin crawl. He beckoned me over, his hand gripping a glass of liquor. "Come here," he said. His tone was sharp, almost accusing as I approached. "Who you been talking to?" he asked, leaning close.
What?
I blinked, confused. "You think I don't know?" His grin was gone now, replaced by something cold. "Don't lie to me," he snapped, his voice cutting through the hum of the party. People nearby glanced our way, then quickly turned away. My stomach tightened.
I haven't said anything, I swear.
He grabbed my wrist, his grip iron strong. "Come with me," he hissed, dragging me toward the sliding glass doors. The cold night air sliced through my dress as we stepped onto the balcony. The wind was sharp, carrying the distant hum of traffic from 17 stories below. "You think you can cross me?" he growled, his voice low and venomous.
What do you mean?
I stammered, my heart pounding. "You've been consorting with my competition," he snarled.
I haven't, I swear.
He didn't listen. His hands shot out, grasping my arms. Before I could respond, he pushed me backward. The cold metal railing hit me, biting into my back. I instantly understood the grave danger I was in. "Maybe I should teach you a lesson," he said, his voice eerily calm now, like a snake coiling before the strike.
No!
I screamed, but the words were ripped from my throat as he grabbed me by the arms and lifted me up. Suddenly, there was nothing beneath me. The world tilted violently, and I was dangling over the edge. The air was cold and biting, rushing past my legs as they fluttered uselessly. My hands clawed at my arms, my nails digging into his skin, but his grip was tightening. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred with tears, the city below me a swirling vortex of lights and death. My mind raced, filled with images of the fall, the rush of air, the sickening thud of my body hitting the pavement. The blood. "Admit it!" he roared, shaking me like a doll. The motion made me scream, my body jerking uncontrollably.
I didn't do anything!
I sobbed, my voice ragged, but the words barely registered. His face twisted into something monstrous, a mask of rage and power. For a moment, I thought I saw him glance down as if he were calculating the distance to the ground. Was he gonna let go? I felt myself slipping, the cold steel of the railing pressing into my ribs as his grip shifted. My legs kicked wildly, my nails digging deeper into his arms.
Please, please don't.
I screamed, my voice raw and desperate. The wind roared, drowning out everything else. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, hammering in my ears like a countdown to the inevitable. He jerked me back over the edge. I collapsed onto the cold tiles of the balcony, my body trembling uncontrollably. My chest pumped as I gasped for air, my heart still racing like it was trying to escape my rib cage. But he wasn't done. "Get up!" he barked, grabbing me by the shoulders and dragging me to my feet. His fingers dug into my skin, leaving bruises that would linger for days. He shoved me backward into a patio chair, the impact jarring my already fragile body. My head snapped back, sudden blackout in my vision. "You think you can walk away from me?" he hissed. Leaning down into his face was inches from mine. "You're nothing without me. Nothing!" I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The terror coursing through me had frozen my body. After what felt like an eternity, he stormed back inside, slamming the door behind him. I sat there for what felt like hours, feeling the cold seep into my skin. My mind rewound the moment I was dangling off that edge, my life in his hands. I came out of that apartment, my legs shaking, unable to walk, but it was nothing compared to what my arms look like now, thumping in their bruised spots, whereas the scars ran deep into my emotional core. He could have killed me. This was not the first time Diddy's anger had boiled over, but I swear it would be the last time I stayed silent. I survived that night. Now, the world needs to know the truth. Sean Diddy Combs is facing a lawsuit from fashion designer Brianna Bana Bongolan, who alleges that in 2016 he assaulted her by groping her and attempting to dangle her off a 17th floor balcony at Cassie Ventura's apartment. Bana claims she feared for her life during the incident, which she says was part of an ongoing intimidation and abuse while working professionally with Combs. She's seeking $10 million in damages for emotional distress and other allegations, including sexual battery and false imprisonment. Combs, who denies the claims, is also facing other legal challenges related to abuse and misconduct. I was so ecstatic to join Justin Bieber's PR team. At just 15 years old, Justin was already breaking records at every turn. People were crazy about him, and we did everything we could to keep his image squeaky clean. The first time I met P. Diddy, I knew he was trouble. He had this larger-than-life presence, always surrounded by bodyguards, women, and people who looked like they owed him something. When Justin got invited to one of Diddy's parties, everyone thought it was a good move for his career. Diddy was a legend, and hanging with him would make Justin look more mature and more connected. Nobody saw the red flags. That party, it wasn't what I thought it'd be. Walking in, I felt it was all wrong. Music blared, lights were dim, and everything reeked of booze and weed. People were doing lines off glass tables, women fainted on couches, and guys laughed too hard in rooms behind locked doors. It wasn't just wild, it was sinister. Justin was way out of his depth. I could see it in his eyes. He was nervous, trying to act like he belonged, but he didn't. Then Diddy appeared, grinning like a wolf. "There's my guy," he said, throwing an arm around Justin. He pulled him away from the group, further into the house. I tried to follow, but one of Diddy's men stepped in my way, smirking. "He's good," the guy said. The whole night felt like it was spiraling out of control. I saw Diddy take Justin into a room and shut the door behind them. When Justin came out, he looked pale, like he'd seen something he couldn't process. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. Justin nodded, avoiding eye contact. His hands were shaking. "Yeah, just tired," he muttered. A few weeks later, the infamous 48 hours happened. Diddy said he wanted to show Justin what it was like to live big. No one could stop it. Diddy was too powerful, and Justin was too starstruck to say no. For 2 days, Justin vanished. No calls, no updates, nothing. When he came back, he wasn't the same. His face was pale, and his energy drained. I tried joking with him, but he barely reacted. "What happened?" I asked when we were alone. He looked at me, his voice low. "It's just a lot," he said. "He doesn't stop." That's when the text began. Diddy would text Justin at odd hours, saying things like, "Come over tonight, we gotta talk," or "You owe me, kid." At first, Justin laughed it off, but it wore him down fast. One night, he just sat there, staring at his phone without blinking. "What is it?" I asked. Justin showed me the message. "You can't ghost me. Don't forget what I've done for you." After that, the parties became worse, pure nightmares. I saw women and men barely conscious, being carried upstairs, men disappearing into locked rooms with people who looked terrified. Drugs were everywhere, on trays, in people's hands, on mirrors in the bathrooms. Even people were slitting their skin with knives to rub drugs. Diddy dragged Justin into the worst of it, isolating him from everyone else. Once I found Justin sitting stiffly on a couch while Diddy sat too close, whispering into his ear. Justin looked like he wanted to run, but he couldn't. "Hey, Justin, we need you out front," I said, trying to give him an excuse to leave. Diddy shot me a look that dropped my stomach. "We're just talking," he said, his voice calm but cold. Justin bolted the second he could, and I followed. Outside, he finally cracked. "I can't do this anymore," he said, pacing back and forth. His hands were trembling, his voice raw. He keeps trying to get me alone. He doesn't leave me alone." "Then I'm gonna stop this," I told him. "You don't get it," he snapped. "He's Diddy. If I piss him off, what do you think happens to me, to my career?" Justin started making excuses to avoid Diddy, but the texts didn't stop. They got worse. "You don't ignore me. You know where to come." Sometimes Justin wouldn't even sleep, sitting in his room staring at his phone like it might explode. The breaking point came at another of Diddy's parties. I stayed close, watching every move. At one point, Diddy grabbed Justin by the arm and dragged him into one of those locked rooms. I stood outside, heart racing, but I couldn't get in. When Justin finally came out, he looked shattered, his face pale, his t-shirt wrinkled, and his eyes red like he'd been crying. "We need to go," he said, his voice shaky. I didn't ask questions. I just got him out of there. Years later, when allegations about Diddy began surfacing, I wasn't shocked. It felt like the world was finally catching up with what we all knew. Justin never spoke about it publicly, but I know it still haunts him. You can see it in the way he flinches at certain names or avoids talking about that time in his life. P. Diddy's recollection of spending 48 hours with a young Justin Bieber remains a significant anecdote in their history. Describing it as a moment of bonding and mentorship, Diddy reflected on seeing Bieber's talent and potential early on. The intense two-day experience symbolized the passing of wisdom, dreams, and ambition between the generation of artists. While the recent allegations against Diddy cast a shadow over his legacy, this story serves as a reminder of the complex dynamics within the entertainment industry. As Bieber continues to focus on his own journey, the lessons from that time remain a part of his story. It started like any other shift. The 8th floor was quiet, just me and my cart full of towels and soaps. I was finishing up room 807 when I heard voices coming from the elevator. I didn't think much of it at first, but something about that man's voice made me stop. I peeked into the hallway, careful not to be seen. My heart skipped when I saw him, Sean Diddy Combs. He was pacing near the elevator, his face twisted with anger. Beside him was Cassie Ventura. She looked tense, her arms crossed tightly, her eyes darting toward the elevator like she wanted to run. "You think I'm stupid?" Diddy spat, his voice low but dripping with venom. "You think I don't know what you've been doing behind my back?" Cassie shook her head, her voice barely audible.
Sean, you're wrong. I haven't done anything.
"Don't lie to me!" he roared, and the sound exploded down the hall. I froze. The anger in his voice wasn't normal. It was unhinged. Cassie took a step back, but he grabbed her wrist. She flinched, trying to pull away.
Sean, please. You're hurting me.
She whispered, his iron-strong finger choking her neck, pushing to the wall, her face visible, struggling for breath. And then he slapped her. The sound rang out like a gunshot, echoing down the hall. Cassie stumbled, grabbing the wall to steady herself. I could see the blood start to drip from her lip, bright red against her pale skin.
Stop!
She cried, but he wasn't listening. "You think you can make a fool out of me? You think you can cheat on me?" His voice was low, shaking with rage. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her back. Cassie screamed, her hands clawing at his arms. "You're mine!" he shouted, shoving her hard against the wall. Her head hit the plaster with a loud thud, leaving blood stains, and she slid to the floor, blood streaming down her face and hair. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, but I couldn't get my fingers to stop trembling long enough to dial. Cassie tried to crawl toward the elevator, her knees dragging across the floor, blood smeared on the tile as she moved. But Diddy grabbed her ankle, dragging her back like she was some rag doll. "You think you can run from me?" he growled. She turned onto her back, her hands raised to protect herself.
Please, Sean, I didn't do anything.
She begged. He didn't care. He punched her in the stomach, brutally hard. I heard the air rush out of her as she crumpled forward, blood drooling out of her bruised lips again, clutching her stomach. Her gasps were wet, like she couldn't breathe, crying, but no voice came out. I finally managed to call the front desk, whispering,
Send security to the 8th floor. Please. Someone's being attacked.
I stayed hidden, my back pressed against the wall as I listened to Cassie cry. Diddy was pacing again, muttering under his breath. Cassie tried to crawl away again, but she was moving so slowly. The elevator dinged, but it was empty. Where the hell do you think you're going? He snarled, grabbing her arm and pulling her to her feet. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed again, her body trembling. He stepped on her waist with his feet pushing down and grabbing her hair and pulling her head up as if he would break her literally like a puppet. Her face bruised and bloody, almost unrecognizable. I'll break you enough so that no one dares touch you again. How does that sound, babe? Sean said with a maddening grin. The service elevator finally opened, and 2 security guards rushed out. Sir, step back! One of them ordered. Diddy turned to them, his face still wild with rage. This is none of your business, he barked. It is now, one of the guards said. Cassie was shaking as she clung to the other guard, her face swollen and streaked with blood. Diddy glared at her, his voice low and dangerous. You'll regret this, he said, his tone dripping with menace. The guards escorted him to the service elevator, but his words hung in the air, heavy and threatening. I stayed hidden until they were gone. When I stepped into the hallway, my legs felt like jelly. The floor was smeared with blood, and the silence felt suffocating. I'll never forget that night. The look in Cassie's eyes, the sound of his voice, and the blood on the floor and walls. Some things you can't unsee. Surveillance footage from 2016 allegedly shows Sean Diddy Combs physically assaulting Cassie Ventura in the lobby of a Los Angeles hotel. The video, released in 2024, depicts Diddy dragging, shoving, and kicking Ventura during a confrontation. This footage surfaced following her earlier lawsuit, acquitting him of years of abuse, including violent incidents like this one. Combs tried to deny the allegations and claimed the video was manipulated at first, but then when the incident fueled public and legal scrutiny over Diddy's alleged abusive behavior, he came live, apologized to Cassie. Whether he meant that apology or not is definitely a question, but the surveillance footage is enough to make people uncomfortable.